The Dominion War had turned the Alpha Quadrant into a charnel house. For 2 years, the combined forces of the Federation, Klingon Empire, and Romulan Star Empire had fought a desperate campaign against the Dominion, an empire from the Gamma Quadrant whose genetically engineered soldiers and shape-shifting founders threatened to conquer everything. Deep Space Nine stood at the war's epicenter, a Cardassian space station orbiting Bajor, commanded by Captain Benjamin Sisko, a man who served 2 roles, Starfleet officer and religious figure to the Bajoran people as their emissary to the prophets. The station had seen battles that would be studied for centuries. It had been captured and reclaimed. It had witnessed betrayals and alliances, but nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared its crew for what happened on Stardate 519483. It began during the Battle of the Wormhole Junction. 300 Dominion ships emerged from the Bajoran wormhole, the stable passage to the Gamma Quadrant that made DS9 strategically critical. They were met by a combined fleet of 200 Federation and Klingon vessels in what was supposed to be a delaying action while reinforcements arrived. Captain Sisko commanded the defense from the USS Defiant, the station's warship, his tactical genius coordinating ships in 3-dimensional combat that turned the space around Bajor into a light show of weapons fire and exploding vessels. "Shields at 40%, Chief O'Brien reported from engineering, his Irish accent thick with stress. "We can't take many more hits like that." "Evasive pattern Delta 7, Sisko commanded, his deep voice cutting through the chaos. "Target that Jem'Hadar battlecruiser's port weapons array. Fire!" The Defiant's pulse phasers and quantum torpedoes lashed out, striking the Dominion ship with devastating precision. But for every enemy vessel they damaged, 2 more pressed forward with the relentless aggression that made Jem'Hadar soldiers feared across the quadrant. On DS9's Operations Center, Colonel Kira Nerys coordinated the station's defense, her Bajoran features tight with concentration. 3 Dominion attack ships breaking through the line, they're heading straight for the station. "Intercept course," Worf barked from tactical, the Klingons' warrior instincts fully engaged. "All weapons, fire at will." The station's phaser arrays lit up space, but the Dominion ships were fast, maneuverable, and piloted by soldiers bred for suicide attacks if necessary. They closed to point-blank range, their Polaron beams hammering DS9's shields with sustained fire that made the station shudder. And then, reality broke. The wormhole, that stable passage the prophets maintained, suddenly pulsed with energy that wasn't normal, wasn't natural, wasn't anything anyone had seen before. The cerulean blue vortex twisted, its event horizon expanding beyond its normal parameters, and something emerged. Not a ship, not matter. Energy, pure, overwhelming, fundamental energy that washed across the battlefield like a wave across the shore. Every living being within 10 light-years felt it simultaneously. Sisko, about to order another attack run, suddenly staggered as if struck by physical force. His consciousness expanded, not like the visions the prophets gave him, but something else entirely. He could feel everything, every life on the Defiant, every life on DS9, every life in the battle, Federation, Klingon, Dominion, all connected through invisible threads of energy that had always existed, but only now became perceptible. On DS9, Kira gasped as the sensation hit her. Her hand instinctively reached for the phaser on her hip, but she felt the weapon's presence differently now. Not just metal and plasma. but energy and potential, as if she could sense its readiness to fire before she even drew it. Dr. Julian Bashir in the infirmary felt patients' life forces like flames, some burning bright, others flickering toward darkness. His genetically enhanced mind raced to categorize this new sensory input and failed completely. Worf's Klingon warrior instincts screamed warnings about power he didn't understand, but also recognition. Something in his blood remembered this, as if Klingon warriors had touched this energy in ages past, and their genetic memory still carried echoes. Odo, the shapeshifter, felt the energy pass through him and recoiled. It touched something fundamental about his nature as a founder, revealing truths about his species he'd never suspected. And across the battlefield, every combatant experienced the same overwhelming expansion of awareness. The Dominion forces felt it too. Jem'Hadar soldiers, bred and conditioned to follow orders without question, suddenly felt something that their genetic programming had suppressed. Individual will, enhanced by connection to fundamental energy. Vorta overseers, cloned administrators of the Dominion, experienced sensations their creators hadn't designed them to feel. For exactly 37 seconds, the battle stopped. Every ship held position. Every weapon went silent. Every warrior, soldier, and officer struggled to process what had just happened to their very perception of reality. Then the Dominion recovered first. A Jem'Hadar on one of the attack ships, a first-named Kartek, felt the new energy flowing through him and instinctively reached for it, the way a drowning man reaches for floating debris. His hand extended toward a Federation runabout that had been strafing his ship, and without understanding how or why, he felt the energy respond to his will. The runabout's trajectory shifted, not from weapons fire or maneuvering thrusters, but from invisible force that grabbed the small craft and hurled it into an asteroid with crushing impact. Kartek stared at his hand in shock, then at his fellow Jem'Hadar, then made a decision that would reshape the war. This power, we will use it to secure victory for the Founders. All ships, advance. Show these solids what we can do. The battle resumed with terrifying new dimensions. Jem'Hadar, who'd felt the energy and instinctively grasped how to manipulate it, began using telekinetic force to deflect incoming fire, to crush unshielded sections of enemy ships, to enhance their already formidable physical capabilities. Not all of them. Most were still too shocked, too confused, but enough that the tide of battle shifted dangerously. On the Defiant, Sisko felt Jem'Hadar attention focusing on his ship, like predatory intent made tangible. His combat instincts, honed through years of Starfleet service and sharpened by his role as emissary, responded before his conscious mind understood what he was doing. Evasive, he started to say, but his hands were already moving, and the ship responded as if his will and the Defiant systems had merged. They dodged polaron beams with precision that shouldn't have been possible, the ship moving through trajectories that O'Brien wasn't programming, but were happening anyway. "Captain," O'Brien shouted from engineering. "I'm reading. I don't know what I'm reading. The helm's responding to inputs I'm not entering. It's like the ship knows where to go before I tell it." "It's not the ship," Dax called from the helm, her trill spots flushed with adrenaline and wonder. "It's him. Benjamin, you're doing this. I can feel it. You're guiding the ship through whatever this new energy is." Sisko didn't have time to question or analyze. 3 Jem'Hadar fighters were closing, their weapons charged. and he could feel their pilot's intent to ram if their weapons didn't destroy the Defiant first. His mind reached out through the strange new energy, not consciously, but instinctively, and found the quantum torpedoes in the Defiant's magazine. He could feel them, feel their readiness, feel the trajectory they needed to fly. "Fire torpedoes!" Sisko commanded, and simultaneously willed those weapons toward their targets through connection he didn't understand, but couldn't deny. The torpedoes launched and curved through space with impossible precision, not following programmed paths, but guided by intention made manifest. All three struck Jem'Hadar fighters simultaneously, the detonations creating a brief safe zone around the Defiant. "How did you do that?" Worf demanded, his Klingon pragmatism warring with his spiritual understanding that some things transcended explanation. "I don't know," Sisko admitted, his hands still shaking from the experience. "But whatever just happened, whatever that energy was, we need to understand it, and fast, because the Dominion is already weaponizing it." He was right. Across the battlefield, Jem'Hadar warriors, who'd successfully tapped into the new energy, were coordinating attacks that combined conventional weapons with telekinetic force. Federation shields designed to stop energy weapons and projectiles weren't calibrated for invisible forces that could crush holes through directed will. The USS Cairo suffered catastrophic hull breach when a Jem'Hadar first literally tore open its saucer section with enhanced strength channeled through the mysterious energy. The IKS Cavort lost main power when Dominion soldiers somehow disrupted its warp core's magnetic containment through force that bypassed technological safeguards. "All ships, fall back to DS9's defensive perimeter," Sisko ordered, recognizing that this battle had transformed into something doctrine and tactics hadn't prepared them for. "We need to regroup and assess what we're dealing with." The retreat was orderly but costly. Dominion forces pressed their advantage, their numbers, and their growing proficiency, with the new energy creating casualties that mounted with every passing minute. By the time the surviving Federation and Klingon ships reached DS9's weapons range, they'd lost 47 vessels to a combination of conventional weapons and this terrifying new power that some combatants could wield while others remained helpless. The Dominion fleet held position just outside the station's defensive perimeter, not withdrawing, but not advancing either. They were regrouping, analyzing, learning. And on the flagship's bridge, the Vorta overseer, Weyoun, stood beside a Jem'Hadar first, who demonstrated remarkable proficiency with the new energy, his clone-crafted mind already formulating strategies. "Fascinating," Weyoun said, with his characteristic, unsettling cheerfulness. "An entirely new form of power, delivered through spatial anomaly, accessible through mental discipline and will. The Founders will be most interested. First, Kartek, how many of your soldiers have demonstrated ability to manipulate this energy?" "Approximately 1 in 30, Weyoun," Kartek replied, his hand still tingling with power he was learning to control. "But the number increases as we practice. It's like a muscle. The more we use it, the stronger it becomes." "Excellent. Then we'll establish training protocols immediately. Imagine, Jem'Hadar soldiers enhanced not just through genetic engineering, but through mastery of fundamental energy that transcends physical laws. The Alpha Quadrant will fall within months." The Federation forces also demonstrated these abilities, Kartek warned. Their commander, the one they call Sisko, he used this power to guide weapons with precision our tactical computers couldn't match. Which is why we'll move quickly, Weiyun decided. Before they can organize training, before they can adapt. We strike DS9 within 48 hours, with forces specifically selected for their sensitivity to this new power. We'll call them Force Adepts. Yes, that has a nice ring to it. The Dominion's Force Adepts will show these solids what true power means. On Deep Space Nine, the surviving fleet licked its wounds, while Sisko assembled every senior officer in the station's wardroom. The atmosphere was tense, not just from the battle, but from the inexplicable experience that had changed something fundamental about reality. Report, Sisko commanded, his tone carrying the weight of command and the strain of someone who just experienced something that challenged everything he understood. Casualties across the fleet, 4,217 dead, another 6,000 wounded, Kira reported, her voice tight with grief, for numbers that represented people she'd served with. Material losses, 47 ships destroyed, another 73 damaged badly enough to require space dock repairs. The Dominion suffered similar losses. Our estimate is they lost about 60 ships. But Benjamin, she paused, clearly struggling with how to articulate what happened. What was that? That energy? That feeling of connection to everything? Dr. Bashir? Sisko looked to his chief medical officer. Julian stood, his genetically enhanced intellect having spent the last 3 hours analyzing sensor data, medical scans, and his own experience. I've run every test I can think of. Neurological scans show increased activity in regions of the brain associated with spatial awareness and empathy. Biometric readings indicate elevated production of neurotransmitters we don't have names for, compounds that shouldn't exist according to known biochemistry. And most significantly, he pulled up a holographic display showing energy readings. There's a new field permeating space itself. It's not electromagnetic, not gravitational, not any of the fundamental forces we've cataloged. It's something else entirely. An energy field that appears to be generated by and connected to living consciousness. The Force, Odo said quietly from his position at the table. Everyone turned to the shapeshifter, who continued. That's what the initial sensor readings labeled it when our computers tried to classify the energy signature. Force, as in fundamental force of nature. The designation stuck because we don't have anything better. The Force? Sisko repeated, testing the word. And some of us can manipulate it? Some of us already have, Dax said, her centuries of trill memories trying to find parallels and failing. Benjamin, you guided the Defiant and its weapons through direct mental connection. I felt you doing it. Kira, you drew your phaser during the battle's opening without looking. You sensed where it was through this force before touching it. Worf, you dodged a polaron beam that sensors say should have vaporized you. You moved before it fired, as if you knew it was coming. Precognition, Bashir confirmed. Several personnel reported similar experiences, knowing what would happen seconds before it occurred. It's as if this force allows perception beyond normal sensory input. The prophets, Sisko said suddenly, his emissary intuition making connections. When I communicate with them, they exist outside linear time. They perceive past, present, and future simultaneously. What if this force, what if it's always existed, but the wormhole's interaction with that spatial anomaly made it perceptible to linear beings for the first time? That would explain the Bajoran orb experiences, Kira said, excitement entering her voice. The tears of the prophets, the orb of prophecy. They've always given people visions, enhanced perception, connection to something greater than themselves. What if those were interactions with this force, channeled through the prophet's technology? Fascinating theory, Bashir acknowledged. But it doesn't help us with the immediate tactical problem. The Dominion is already weaponizing force abilities. We watch Jem'Hadar soldiers move objects with their minds, crush ship hulls through directed will, and predict our tactical maneuvers. If they master these abilities before we do, they'll win the war, Worf finished grimly. Captain, the Klingon Empire has legions of warriors who could sense their enemy's intentions, who moved with impossible speed, who turned battle through will alone. We called them Ka-Hom, spirit warriors. Most dismiss such tales as myth, but if this force has always existed in rare individuals, then every culture probably has their myths about it, Dax completed. Vulcan Kalinar, masters who achieved perfect logic and demonstrated abilities beyond normal telepathy. Betazoid matriarchs with empathic powers that transcend their species' natural abilities. Even human history has accounts of individuals with seemingly supernatural capabilities. Which means we're not starting from zero, Sisko decided, his tactical mind shifting from analysis to strategy. If this force can be trained, can be taught, then we need to establish protocols immediately. Dr. Bashir, I want you working with Counselor Ezri to identify personnel who demonstrate force sensitivity. Kira, coordinate with Bajoran religious authorities. If the orbs really are force-related, technology, the Vedic assembly, might have training techniques in their ancient texts. Worf, contact the Klingon High Council. If they have historical accounts of Ka-Hom warriors, we need that information. And you, Captain? Odo asked. What will you be doing? Sisko's expression became grim determination, mixed with something that might have been fear. I'm going to do what I do best. Learn through doing. If I can manipulate this force instinctively during combat, then I can learn to control it deliberately. We have maybe 48 hours before the Dominion attacks again, this time with soldiers trained specifically to use force abilities. We need every advantage we can develop. Benjamin, Dax said carefully, force abilities combined with your connection to the prophets. That could be incredibly powerful, or incredibly dangerous. You're already walking a line between Starfleet officer and religious figure, adding mystical energy manipulation to that mix. I know the risks, old man, Sisko replied, using his nickname for his centuries-old friend. But we don't have the luxury of caution. The Dominion is coming, and they're not going to hesitate to use every advantage this force provides. Neither can we. An alert suddenly blared across the station. Long-range sensors detecting something approaching from the Gamma Quadrant at high warp. Not Dominion ships. The energy signature was wrong. On screen, Sisko ordered, moving to ops with the reflexes of a commander who'd lived through crisis after crisis. The view screen showed a vessel unlike anything in Starfleet databases. Sleek, organic-looking, powered by energy sources that registered as force-related on the new sensor configurations Bashir had jury-rigged. And it was broadcasting on all frequencies. The transmission showed a being that made even Odo's shape-shifting seem mundane, humanoid in basic structure, but composed of what looked like living shadow and crimson energy. Its eyes burning with power that transcended physical form. Peoples of the Alpha Quadrant, the being said, its voice resonating with harmonics that suggested multiple entities speaking in unison. I am Valdris, herald of the dark convergence. The force you have discovered is not gift. It is test. A test you are failing. Who are you? Cisco demanded. What do you want? We are what happens when beings master the dark side of the force and transcend physical limitation, Valdris replied. We come from a dimension where the force is not nascent energy, but fundamental reality. Your wormhole's interaction with our realm has created a bridge, and through that bridge, the force flows into your universe for the first time in its history. The spatial anomaly, Bashir breathed. It wasn't natural. It was dimensional intersection. Correct, primitive one, Valdris said with contempt that burned like acid. And now your species, all your species, must choose. Master the force's dark side and achieve power beyond your current limitations, or cling to your weak philosophies of peace and cooperation and be swept aside by those willing to embrace true strength. The Dominion has already chosen. Another voice interrupted the transmission. A Vorta appeared on split screen. Wayun, broadcasting from the Dominion flagship. We thank you, Herald Valdris, for this gift. The Dominion embraces the dark side's power. We will use it to bring order to this chaotic quadrant. Excellent. Valdris's pleasure was evident. Then let us formalize our alliance. The Dark Convergence will provide training, knowledge, and power to the Dominion. And in exchange, you will help us fully breach the dimensional barrier and establish our empire in your reality. Together, we will rule this quadrant, then this galaxy, then... We refuse, Cisco interrupted, his voice carrying absolute conviction. The words came not just from Starfleet training, but from something deeper. His role as emissary, his connection to the prophets, and now his emerging understanding of the Force itself. The Federation doesn't seek power through domination. We believe in cooperation, in diversity, in the idea that different beings working together are stronger than any single tyrannical force. Then you will die, Valdris said simply. The Dominion has chosen strength. We will enhance their soldiers, teach them to wield the dark side, and grant them abilities your primitive understanding cannot counter. You have 72 hours before we demonstrate what true force mastery means. Use that time to reconsider, or use it to prepare your final defenses. The result will be the same. The transmission ended, leaving DS9's crew in stunned silence. 72 hours, Kira said quietly. That's how long we have to learn to use this force well enough to counter an enemy who's getting training from beings that have mastered it across dimensions. Then we'd better get started, Cisco said, his expression showing no trace of doubt despite the impossible odds. Red alert, all personnel to battle stations, and someone find me everything. Everything. Our databases have on meditation, mental discipline, and historical accounts of superhuman abilities. If the Dominion's getting teachers from another dimension, we'll teach ourselves. The hard way. The Starfleet way. The emissary's way, Kira added, her faith in Cisco absolute. He looked at her, then at his crew, faces showing fear mixed with determination, understanding that they stood at a turning point in galactic history. The Force had arrived in their universe, and with it came threats beyond anything the Federation had faced. But also possibilities. Because if one thing defined Starfleet, it was the belief that even impossible challenges could be overcome through courage, ingenuity, and the strength that came from beings working together rather than dominating each other. The Dominion chose the dark side, The Federation would forge a different path, and in 72 hours, the Battle of Deep Space Nine would demonstrate which philosophy was truly stronger: power achieved through domination, or strength earned through unity. The Force had awakened in the Star Trek universe, and nothing would ever be the same. The training began immediately, driven by desperation and the ticking clock of Valdris's ultimatum. Every available space on Deep Space Nine transformed into makeshift meditation chambers, combat training areas, and experimental laboratories where Starfleet's scientific method collided with mystical energy that defied conventional physics. Captain Sisko stood in his quarters, cleared of furniture, the lights dimmed, attempting something that felt both completely natural and utterly alien. Dr. Bashir had provided neurological scans of his brain activity during the battle, showing which regions activated when he'd guided the Defiant through Force manipulation. Now, Sisko tried to consciously access those same neural pathways. "Feel the Force around you," came Kira's voice from the doorway. She'd volunteered to assist, drawing on Bajoran's spiritual practices that suddenly seemed far more relevant than anyone had imagined. The Vedic texts speak of the Pog, the life force that flows through all things. I think they were describing this all along. The prophets exist outside linear time, Sisko said, his eyes closed, his breathing controlled. When I communicate with them, I touch something beyond normal reality. Maybe that's always been the Force, and I just never understood what I was experiencing. He extended his hand toward a pad on his desk, reaching out not physically, but through will and intention. For long moments, nothing happened. Then the pad trembled, rose a centimeter, and fell back with a clatter. "Progress," Kira said encouragingly. "That's more than most of us can do." Half the crew reports feeling the Force during the battle, but consciously accessing it, that's proving much harder. Because we're trying to rationalize something that transcends pure logic, Sisko replied, frustration evident in his voice. Starfleet trains us to analyze, to understand through reason and scientific method. But the Force, it responds to instinct, to emotion, to something primal that our training actively suppresses. Then perhaps, came a measured voice from the comm system. Odo, monitoring from ops. You should stop trying to understand it and simply accept it. As a shapeshifter, I don't consciously control every molecule when I change form. I simply will the change, and my body responds. Maybe the Force works similarly. Sisko considered this, then cleared his mind of analysis and simply felt the space station around him, the thousands of life forms aboard it, the vast emptiness of space beyond, and threading through everything, connecting it all, the Force, an invisible web of energy that made individual beings part of something infinitely larger. The pad rose smoothly off the desk, floated across the room, and settled gently in Sisko's outstretched hand. Yes! Kira's excitement was infectious. That's it. You're doing it. But Sisko's expression darkened as he opened his eyes. I'm moving a Piad, Valdris, and the Darky. Convergence are teaching Jem'Hadar soldiers to crush starships with their minds. We're not even close to ready. In DS9's holosuite, Worf led a training session that combined Klingon warrior traditions with experimental Force techniques. A dozen security officers, humans, Bajorans, Bolians, even a Trill, faced holographic opponents while Worf prowled among them like a predator assessing prey. Again! Worf barked as a human ensign failed to dodge a simulated Jem'Hadar blade strike. You are thinking too much. Warriors do not analyze. They act. The Force gives you instincts beyond normal perception. Trust those instincts. Easy for you to say, sir, the ensign gasped, resetting for another attempt. You're Klingon. Your species has warrior instinct bred into you. I'm from Earth. My ancestors gave up warfare centuries ago. Then rediscover what they abandoned, Worf growled. The Quaham warriors of Klingon legend did not achieve their abilities through genetic superiority. They achieved them through absolute commitment to combat awareness. They did not think about the battle. They became one with it. The Force merely amplifies what focused will can accomplish. He demonstrated, moving through the holographic enemies with speed that exceeded his normal capabilities. But more impressive than speed was precision. Worf anticipated every attack before it came, his body moving in perfect counter rhythms, as if the battle was choreographed and only he knew the steps. You see, Worf said, not even breathing hard despite the intense exercise. I do not predict their movements through logic. I feel their intentions through the Force, their aggression, their targeting priorities. These create ripples in the Force that I perceive and react to before their actions manifest physically. Combat precognition, Lieutenant Nog observed from the sidelines. The young Ferengi had been analyzing the training sessions with engineering precision. If we could quantify the reaction time advantage, we could calculate optimal engagement ranges and tactics. This is not about calculations, Worf snapped, his Klingon temperament flaring. The Force is not technology to be optimized. It is warrior spirit made manifest. It is the difference between a soldier who follows programming and a warrior who transcends limitation through pure will. Commander Worf is correct, came Chief O'Brien's voice from the holosuite controls. The engineer had been monitoring biometric data during training. I'm reading neural activity patterns that don't match normal combat stress. It's like their brains are processing information through pathways that shouldn't exist. The Force isn't enhancing their normal abilities. It's creating entirely new ones. Then we need more time to develop them, Nog said practically. 72 hours minus the 12 we've already spent leaves 60 hours. That's not enough to train a fighting force capable of matching Dominion soldiers, getting taught by dimensional force masters. Then we focus our efforts, Worf decided, his tactical mind overriding his warrior's desire to train everyone. Identify personnel who demonstrate strongest force sensitivity. Concentrate training resources on them. Create an elite unit, a force combat team who can counter whatever enhanced Jem'Hadar the Dominion deploys. A Starfleet Jedi Order, O'Brien said with grim humor. Never thought I'd see the day. Not Jedi, Worf corrected. We know nothing of their philosophy or training methods. We will create our own tradition. One built on Starfleet values, Klingon warrior spirit, and the collective wisdom of every culture in the Federation. We will show the dark convergence that light does not require their teachings to manifest. In the station's science labs, Dr. Bashir worked alongside Jadzia Dax and a team of xenobiologists, physicists, and even a Vulcan philosopher to understand the Force from every possible angle, simultaneously. The energy readings are consistent across all sensors, Dax reported, her multiple lifetimes of scientific knowledge barely keeping pace with the data. The Force permeates space at quantum levels. It's not transmitted by particles or waves. It simply exists everywhere simultaneously, connecting all matter and energy. Like the zero-point field, a human physicist suggested, the underlying quantum vacuum that pervades all space. What if the Force is consciousness interacting with that fundamental layer of reality? That would explain the mental component, Bashir agreed, running neurological scans on volunteers who demonstrated Force abilities. Look at this. When someone successfully manipulates the Force, their brain activity shows entanglement patterns with the target of manipulation. It's as if consciousness and matter are achieving quantum coherence through the Force as a medium. Fascinating from a scientific perspective. The Vulcan philosopher, Tikral, observed with characteristically muted emotion, but disturbing from a logical standpoint. If consciousness can directly affect matter through the Force, then objective reality becomes subordinate to subjective will. The fundamental principle of empiricism is violated. Unless, Dax suggested, excitement entering her voice, empiricism was always incomplete. What if consciousness was always a fundamental force of nature, but so weak we couldn't detect it? And this spatial anomaly, this dimensional breach, suddenly amplified that force to detectable levels. You're suggesting consciousness is like a fifth fundamental force? Bashir's genetically enhanced mind raced through implications. Alongside gravity, electromagnetism, strong and weak nuclear forces, consciousness as a fundamental property of the universe. It would explain so many anomalies, Dax said, pulling up data. Q-continuum entities who manipulate reality through thought. The prophets, non-linear perception. Betazoid telepathy, Vulcan mind melds, even the Borg collective consciousness. We always classified these as individual phenomena, but what if they're all expressions of this consciousness-force interaction? The Force, Tikral said slowly, may not be new to our universe. It may have always existed in potential, waiting for sufficient conditions to manifest detectably. The dimensional breach merely provided the catalyst. Which means we're not learning something alien, Bashir realized. We're discovering something that was always part of our reality, just invisible until now. That's why some personnel are adapting faster than others. They're naturally attuned to this aspect of existence. Speaking of which, Dax said, pulling up personnel files, I've been analyzing who demonstrates strongest force sensitivity. The pattern is interesting. High force sensitivity correlates with previous experience of consciousness expanding phenomena, strong emotional connections to others, and, this is fascinating, willingness to accept non-rational truths alongside logical analysis. In other words, Bashir summarized, rigid rationalists are having the hardest time accessing force abilities, while individuals who balance logic with intuition, science with spirituality, are adapting fastest. Captain Sisko, Dax confirmed. He's simultaneously a Starfleet officer trained in tactical analysis and the emissary who communicates with non-corporeal beings outside linear time. That duality makes him possibly the most force-sensitive being on the station. Kira's faith and combat experience create similar synergy. Even Odo's shapeshifting requires accepting the impossible as normal. While I, Tikral admitted, with what might have been Vulcan irony, struggle because my logical discipline actively resists accepting force manipulation as real despite empirical evidence. Fascinating paradox. An alert interrupted their discussion. Incoming. Transmission from Starfleet Command. Admiral Ross appeared on the display, his expression carrying the weight of someone coordinating a war effort that had just become exponentially more complicated. Captain Bashir, Commander Dax. Ross greeted them formally. I'm transmitting Starfleet's preliminary force capability assessment. We've had reports from across the fleet. Approximately 1 in 50 personnel demonstrate some level of force sensitivity. But without training protocols, most can barely lift objects or sense immediate danger. You're our most advanced research site. What have you learned that we can distribute fleet-wide? Admiral, Dax replied, we can transmit our findings, but the issue isn't information, it's time. Force abilities develop through practice and mental discipline that takes weeks or months, not hours. We can teach theory, but practical capability requires training. We don't have time to provide before the Dominion attacks. Then we need a force multiplier, Ross said grimly. The Dominion's getting training from dimensional force masters. We need our own teachers, our own enhancement. Have you detected any indication that beings favorable to the Federation exist in this force dimension? Nothing concrete, Bashir admitted, but the entity Valdris represents the dark convergence, implying there are other factions. If there's a dark side, logic suggests a light side must exist in balance. Find them, Ross ordered. Use the wormhole, use the prophets, use whatever resources you have. We need allies who understand the Force, or this war is over. Ross out. The transmission ended, leaving the team in contemplative silence. The prophets, Dax said slowly. Benjamin's right. They've always existed outside linear time, perceiving past and future simultaneously. That's not conventional existence. What if they're force entities who've been in our universe all along? The Bajoran wormhole as a permanent dimensional bridge, Bashir extrapolated. Not to the Gamma Quadrant, but to a force dimension that happens to connect to both quadrants. That would explain why the prophets can affect events without physical presence. We need to inform Captain Sisko, Tikral stated. If the prophets are force entities, his role as emissary takes on new significance. He may be able to contact light-side beings through his established connection. Sisko stood before the Orb of Prophecy in the station's Bajoran temple, the ancient artifact glowing with energy that sensors now identified as force-related. Kira stood beside him, her faith absolute, while Odo observed from a respectful distance. Security chief duty, warring with curiosity about religious phenomena he'd always dismissed as superstition. The prophets have been silent since the Force manifestation, Kira said quietly. No visions, no communications. It's like they're waiting for something. Or preparing for something, Sisko replied, his emissary senses tingling with anticipation. The Force isn't random. Its arrival through the wormhole's interaction with dimensional barriers. That has the Prophet's fingerprints all over it. They exist outside linear time. They would have known this was coming. He reached toward the orb, not physically, but through Force connection he was learning to control. The artifact's glow intensified, and suddenly Sisko's consciousness expanded beyond the temple, beyond the station, beyond physical reality itself. He stood in the timeless space where the prophets manifested, a realm of light and possibility where past, present, and future existed simultaneously. But something was different. The prophets appeared not as they usually did, wearing faces of people from Sisko's memories, but as beings of pure luminous energy, their forms suggesting humanoid shapes, but transcending physical limitation. The Sisko, they said in unison, their voice resonating through dimensions. You have learned to perceive us as we truly are. You're Force entities, Sisko realized. You've always been Force entities. The wormhole isn't a passage through space. It's a bridge between physical reality and the Force dimension. Correct and incorrect, the prophets replied. Their communication spanning concepts linear language couldn't properly express. We exist within and between. The Force is not separate dimension. It is underlying truth of all dimensions. What you perceive as physical reality is surface. The Force is the depth from which surface emerges. The dark convergence, Sisko said urgently. They're teaching the Dominion to use Force abilities. They're going to attack Deep Space Nine with powers we can't counter. We need help. We need training. The dark is necessary, the prophets stated, their logic transcending morality. Without dark, light has no meaning. Without conflict, growth does not occur. The Sisko must understand. Force is not good or evil. Force simply is. How beings choose to use it determines light or dark. That's not helpful. Sisko's frustration broke through his awe. My people are going to die. The Dominion is going to conquer the Alpha Quadrant. I need practical assistance, not philosophical lectures. The prophet's energy pulsed with what might have been amusement. The Sisko is linear. You see time as progression. You see conflict as problem requiring solution. We see all moments simultaneously. We see outcomes already achieved. You will not fail. Because you've seen the future? Sisko challenged. Or because you're going to help? We are helping. We have always been helping. You exist because we helped. The Force manifestation occurs because we permitted dimensional barrier to weaken. Your abilities develop because we guide your perception toward truth. You ask for help while standing in the center of help already provided. Then teach me, Sisko demanded. Show me how to use these abilities well enough to defend my station and my people. The prophet's energy intensified, flowing toward Sisko like liquid light. We cannot teach what you already know. The Force responds to will and intention. Your will is protection. Your intention is defense of community. These align with Force's fundamental nature. Connection between beings. Cooperation instead of domination. You need no teaching. You need only trust what you already understand. But the Dominion has teachers who've mastered the dark side across dimensions. And you have connection to beings who exist beyond dimensions entirely. The prophets interrupted. The Sisko contains multitudes. Starfleet officer, emissary, father, warrior. Each aspect provides strength. Dark side users achieve power by surrendering to single aspect, usually domination or rage. They become strong but rigid. You remain flexible. Inflexibility is strength they cannot match. You're saying my refusal to embrace the dark side is actually an advantage? We are saying the dark side promises power, but delivers limitation. Those who master darkness become servants of their own appetite for control. They grow strong in narrow ways while becoming weak in breadth. You grow strong in many ways simultaneously. When conflict comes, breadth defeats narrow strength. This is truth across all timelines we perceive. The vision began to fade, but the prophet's energy remained connected to Sisko's consciousness. The Force is now part of your reality. It will remain. What you do with it determines future of your civilization. Choose cooperation over domination. Choose growth over control. Choose light not because it is good, but because it is sustainable. These choices ensure survival and prosperity across timelines we observe. Sisko's consciousness snapped back to the temple. He staggered, and Kira caught him with reflexes enhanced by emerging Force abilities. Benjamin? Kira's concern was immediate. What did they show you? The truth? Sisko replied, his voice carrying new certainty. The prophets are Force entities who've existed in our universe all along. The Force itself isn't new. It's always been here, just imperceptible. And we don't need to match the Dark Convergence's training because we have advantages they can't replicate. Diversity, cooperation, and connection to beings who transcend the dark-light dichotomy entirely. That sounds encouraging, Odo observed, but translate it into tactical advantage. How does philosophical superiority stop Dominion soldiers who can crush ships with their minds? Sisko's smile carried the confidence of someone who'd just seen the path forward with perfect clarity. By doing what Starfleet does best, innovating. The Dark Convergence teaches individual power, will develop collective strength. They enhance soldiers, will enhance teams. They embrace domination, will weaponize cooperation. He activated his comm badge. Sisko to all senior staff. Conference room, immediately. I know how we're going to win this. 48 hours after the Force manifestation, 36 hours before Valdris's deadline, Deep Space Nine had transformed from a military outpost into something unprecedented in Federation history. A training ground where Starfleet discipline merged with Force capability to create warriors unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Sisko stood before his assembled senior staff and the personnel who demonstrated strongest Force sensitivity. About 80 individuals out of the station's population of 7,000. Not many, but enough if his plan worked. The Dominion has Force-using individuals, Sisko began, his command presence amplified by Force energy that made every word carry weight beyond mere sound. They're training soldiers to use telekinesis, precognition, and enhanced combat abilities. If we try to match them person for person, we'll lose. Their soldiers are bred for combat, genetically optimized for warfare. Ours are scientists, engineers, civilians who volunteered for Starfleet service. Individual comparison favors them. But, Worf prompted, sensing his captain had reached a tactical conclusion. But the dark side teaches individual power at the expense of connection, Sisko continued. Users become stronger personally while becoming isolated from each other. They can't share strength because their philosophy is fundamentally competitive, each Force user hoarding power for themselves. While we, Dax interjected, understanding dawning, could create Force bonds between individuals, pool our abilities, become stronger collectively than any individual could achieve alone. Exactly, Sisko confirmed. The prophets showed me. The Force connects all living things. Darkside users sever those connections to achieve personal power. We'll embrace those connections and weaponize cooperation. Science teams coordinating through Force telepathy. Engineering teams manipulating ship systems through collective will. Combat teams moving with perfect synchronization because they share precognitive awareness. Force-enhanced teamwork, O'Brien said, his engineering mind immediately grasping the applications. If we can coordinate through the Force instead of just verbal communication, our response time to threats would be nearly instantaneous. Damage control teams would know where problems are before sensors detect them. Tactical would anticipate enemy maneuvers before they happen. Precisely, Sisko said. And the beauty of it, this approach plays to Federation strengths. We're already trained to work in diverse teams. We already value cooperation over individual glory. The Force just amplifies what we're already good at. There is still the problem of limited time, T'Krall observed logically. Developing force bonds between individuals requires trust and practice. We have 36 hours. Then we focus on existing teams, Kira suggested. People who already trust each other, who've worked together for years. Ops, crew, senior staff, security teams. We build on established relationships instead of trying to create new ones. And we use every advantage the station provides, Bashir added. The Bajoran orbs are force artifacts. The wormhole is a dimensional bridge to force entities. The station itself orbits a planet whose religion has always incorporated force concepts under different terminology. This isn't just any location. It's uniquely suited for force development. Sisko nodded, then made the decision that would define the coming battle. We have 36 hours. We'll spend it creating something the galaxy has never seen. A Starfleet crew enhanced not by individual force power, but by collective force coordination. When the Dominion attacks, they'll bring force-using soldiers. We'll show them a force-using community, and we'll demonstrate that cooperation will always defeat domination. This is the way, Nog said suddenly, then looked embarrassed. Sorry, Captain. I've been reviewing historical databases about warrior cultures and force traditions. That phrase keeps appearing in Mandalorian texts. Seemed appropriate. It is appropriate, Sisko agreed, because we're creating our own way. The Federation's approach to force capability. Not Jedi, not Sith. Something new that honors our values while adapting to our new reality. He looked around the conference room, at faces showing determination mixed with fear, understanding that they stood at a pivot point in history. The Force had awakened in their universe. The Dominion had chosen darkness. The Federation would forge a different path. And in 36 hours, the Battle of Deep Space Nine would demonstrate which philosophy the Force itself favored. The training intensified with desperation-fueled focus that made every hour count. And across the wormhole, in Dominion space, Jem'Hadar soldiers received very different instruction from very different teachers. The war was about to enter a new phase, and nothing would ever be the same. The Dominion training facility floated in the cold void near the wormhole's Gamma Quadrant terminus, a massive station constructed specifically to transform Jem'Hadar soldiers into something far more deadly than their genetic programming had already made them. Valdris moved through the training halls like a specter of living shadow, his form shifting between solid matter and pure dark energy as he observed his students. Jem'Hadar warriors, already bred for aggression, already conditioned for absolute obedience, now learned to channel the dark side of the Force with terrifying efficiency. Your anger is strength, Valdris instructed, his voice resonating with harmonics that bypassed conscious thought and spoke directly to primal emotion. Your hatred is power. The Founders created you to serve. I teach you to dominate. Feel the injustice of your existence, born only to die for beings who view you as tools. Channel that rage through the Force. A Jem'Hadar, first named Kartek, the same soldier who'd first wielded force power during the initial battle, stood in the training circle, his hands extended toward a massive durasteel beam suspended by anti-gravity generators. His face contorted with concentration and fury as dark energy crackled around his fists. The beam trembled, groaned, then crumpled like paper under the pressure of telekinetic force amplified by darkside rage. Yes, Valdris's pleasure was palpable. You begin to understand. The Force responds to passion, to intensity of will. The Federation teaches cooperation and restraint. These are weaknesses disguised as virtues. True power comes from embracing your nature as predator, as warrior, as conqueror. Around the training hall, dozens of other Jem'Hadar practice similar techniques. Some manipulated objects with increasing precision. Others engaged in combat that moved at speeds their enhanced biology alone couldn't achieve. A few demonstrated rudimentary force lightning, dark energy that crackled from their fingertips with lethal potential. Weyoun observed from a viewing platform, his clone-crafted mind calculating strategic applications. Beside him stood a female changeling, one of the founders who ruled the Dominion. Her liquid form barely containing itself as she watched her soldiers transform into something beyond even her genetic engineering. Impressive, the changeling acknowledged. But these abilities, can they be maintained in combat, under real battlefield stress? They will exceed your expectations, Founder, Weyoun assured her with his characteristic unsettling cheerfulness. The Dark Convergence has trained Force users across dimensional barriers for millennia. Their methods are proven. Our Jem'Hadar are proving remarkably receptive. Their genetic conditioning for aggression aligns perfectly with dark side philosophy. And the Federation? The changeling asked. Starfleet reports indicate they're attempting to develop Force capabilities as well. They're trying, Weyoun confirmed, but they're handicapped by their philosophy. The Federation believes in peace, cooperation, restraint, all principles that limit dark side power development. They'll train individuals, perhaps achieve modest capabilities, but they cannot match warriors specifically designed for combat and now enhanced by teachers who've mastered darkness across dimensions. You sound confident, the changeling observed. Confidence often precedes failure. I sound realistic, Founder, Weyoun replied. Deep Space Nine has approximately 2,000 Starfleet and Bajoran personnel. We've identified perhaps 100 who demonstrate Force sensitivity. Of those, maybe 20 who can manifest abilities beyond basic object manipulation. They have no training tradition, no teachers with millennial experience, and a cultural bias against the aggressive emotions that fuel dark side power. He gestured toward the training hall where Jem'Hadar were now practicing Force-enhanced combat against holographic opponents. We have 10,000 Jem'Hadar aboard this facility. 2,000 demonstrate strong Force sensitivity. Of those, 500 are achieving combat-applicable abilities after just 40 hours of training. When we attack Deep Space Nine, we'll bring overwhelming numerical superiority enhanced by dark side power that the Federation cannot counter. And if the Prophets intervene? The changeling asked. The wormhole entities have protected Bajor and the Federation before. What prevents them from simply neutralizing our Force-using soldiers? The Prophets exist outside linear time, but the Force transcends even their domain, Valdris interjected, approaching the viewing platform with predatory grace. They are powerful within their dimensional sphere, but the dark side operates across all dimensions simultaneously. They cannot unmake what we've taught without unmaking the Force itself, and that would require destroying the fundamental fabric of consciousness across the universe. Even beings as powerful as your prophets cannot achieve such totality. Then we proceed as planned, the changeling decided. 24 hours from now, we attack Deep Space Nine with full force. Conventional fleet elements supported by Force-enhanced Jem'Hadar boarding parties. We'll overwhelm their defenses, capture the station, and demonstrate to the Federation that their philosophy of cooperation and restraint cannot withstand warriors who embrace true power. The Alpha Quadrant will fall within months, Weyoun predicted with satisfaction. And the Dominion will extend across both quadrants, bringing order to chaos through the combination of founder wisdom and dark side strength. It is inevitable. On the training floor below, Kartek crushed another Durasteel beam, his face showing satisfaction that his genetic conditioning had never permitted before. The Ketracel white that controlled Jem'Hadar through biological addiction was still present, but the dark side power made him feel something new. Not just the absence of withdrawal pain, but actual pleasure in his own capability. He was still slave to the Founders, but now he was a slave who could crush starships. It was progress. 24 hours before the Dominion attack, Deep Space Nine's crew had achieved something remarkable through desperation-fueled innovation. The station's operations center no longer operated like a conventional Starfleet facility. It had transformed into something that blurred the line between technological coordination and psychic symphony. Captain Sisko stood at the center of ops, but his consciousness extended far beyond his physical position. Through force bonds he developed with his senior staff, he perceived the station from multiple perspectives simultaneously. Kira's tactical awareness, Dax's scientific understanding, O'Brien's engineering intuition, Worf's combat instincts, Bashir's medical monitoring of crew stress levels, Odo's security assessment of potential vulnerabilities. Not telepathy in the conventional sense, more like a shared awareness that allowed information to flow between bonded individuals without verbal communication, requiring time and interpretation. When O'Brien detected a minor power fluctuation in the shield generators, Sisko knew it simultaneously. When Kira identified a potential attack vector in the station's defensive perimeter, everyone felt her tactical concern instantly. "This is extraordinary," Dax breathed, her trill symbiont's memories spanning 8 lifetimes, but encountering nothing comparable. "Benjamin, I can feel your command decisions forming before you vocalize them. It's like we're operating as a single distributed intelligence." "That's exactly what we are," Sisko confirmed, his voice carrying both physical sound and force resonance that made his words register at multiple levels. "The Dominion is training individual force users. We've created a force-linked collective. When they attack, their soldiers will be powerful but isolated. Our crew will be individually weaker but exponentially more coordinated. The Borg achieve similar coordination through technological assimilation," Nog observed from his engineering station. "We're accomplishing it through voluntary force bonds. That's unprecedented." "It's also exhausting," Bashir warned, monitoring biometric data. "Force bond maintenance requires mental effort. The crew can sustain current levels for maybe 6 hours of combat before cognitive fatigue becomes dangerous. After that, the bonds will start degrading." 6 hours should be sufficient," Worf stated with Klingon confidence. "If we cannot defeat the Dominion assault in 6 hours, we will not defeat it at all. The question is whether our force coordination can counter their individual power advantage. We're about to find out," Odo announced from security, his shapeshifter senses detecting something before the sensors did. Wormhole activity, multiple contacts emerging. The view screen showed the Bajoran wormhole dilating like a cosmic eye opening. Through it poured Dominion ships, battle cruisers, attack fighters, and troop transports in numbers that made DS9's defensive fleet seem hopelessly outnumbered. 247 vessels, Dax reported, her tone professionally calm, despite the devastating odds. Approximately 50,000 Dominion soldiers, if they're at full capacity. Our defensive fleet numbers 73 ships, with maybe 15,000 personnel. And Deep Space Nine has 7,000 souls aboard, Kira added grimly. If they breach the station? They won't, Sisko stated with absolute conviction that flowed through force bonds to strengthen every linked crew member's resolve. We've trained for this. Trust the bonds. Trust each other. Trust the Force. The Dominion fleet arranged itself in attack formation, and a transmission came through. Valdris's shadowy form appearing on the view screen, with Weyoun standing beside him. Captain Sisko, Valdris greeted with malicious pleasure. Your time has expired. We offered you the opportunity to embrace the dark side's power. You chose Federation weakness instead. Now you'll witness what true Force mastery accomplishes against philosophical delusion. We chose differently, Sisko corrected, his voice carrying Force resonance that made even Valdris pause. Not weakness, strength. Not individual power, collective capability. You taught the Dominion to wield the Force as weapon. We integrated it as foundation for cooperation. Let's see which approach the Force itself favors. Bold words from a commander about to watch his station burn, Weyoun said cheerfully. We have Force-enhanced soldiers who can tear through your hull plating with their minds. What can your cooperation achieve against that? Everything, Sisko replied simply, then cut the transmission. All ships, battle stations, ops crew, deepen force bonds. Let's show the Dominion what Starfleet is really capable of. The Dominion attack began with conventional weapons, polaron beams, and plasma torpedoes that lit space with deadly light. DS-9's defensive fleet engaged, their coordination enhanced by force-linked tactical awareness that allowed maneuvers no standard fleet could achieve. The Defiant and USS Lakota moved in perfect tandem, despite being piloted by different crews. Their force-bonded commanders sharing tactical awareness that made their ships extensions of unified strategic thinking. When Dominion fighters attempted to flank the Defiant, the Lakota was already positioned to intercept, its weapons firing through coordinates that the Defiant's tactical officer transmitted through force connection faster than communication systems could manage. This coordination is impossible. A Dominion tactical officer reported to Weyoun from the flagship bridge. Their ships are responding to threats before we fully committed to attack vectors. It's as if they're reading our intentions. They're using force precognition, Valdris explained with growing interest. But not individually. They're sharing precognitive awareness across multiple vessels simultaneously. Intriguing adaptation. Compensate by increasing attack unpredictability, randomized targeting patterns. But randomization couldn't counter intuition enhanced by force bonds. DS-9's defensive fleet moved with liquid grace, their formations shifting and flowing like a single organism responding to threats through distributed nervous system rather than centralized command. Then the Dominion deployed their force-enhanced soldiers. Boarding torpedoes, armored assault craft designed to breach station hulls, launched from Dominion carriers. But these torpedoes were guided not by navigation computers, but by Jem'Hadar, whose force precognition let them anticipate point defense fire and evade with impossible precision. 12 torpedoes struck Deep Space Nine's outer hull, their shaped charges burning through armor to deposit Jem'Hadar assault teams directly into the station's corridors. What followed demonstrated the terrifying potential of dark-side trained warriors. Kartek led a team through DS9's habitat ring. His force-enhanced strength, allowing him to tear through reinforced bulkheads with his bare hands. Phaser fire that should have stopped Jem'Hadar soldiers was deflected by telekinetic barriers or simply absorbed by dark-side-enhanced durability. "Resistance is pointless," Kartek roared, using force projection to amplify his voice until it echoed through entire sections. "The dark side grants power your Federation philosophy cannot match. Surrender and you'll be enslaved. Resist and you'll be destroyed." Starfleet security teams attempted to stop the assault using conventional tactics and were overwhelmed. Jem'Hadar moved with precognitive awareness of incoming fire, their force abilities turning standard defensive protocols into suicide missions for anyone attempting them. But then, DS9's force-bonded defenders engaged. Worf led a security team, whose members shared tactical awareness through force connection. They didn't communicate verbally, didn't need to. When Worf sensed a Jem'Hadar about to use telekinesis to crush a security officer, the entire team shifted formation, their combined defensive force projection creating a barrier that stopped the attack. "Interesting," Kartek observed as his assault was checked for the first time. "You've learned to pool your limited abilities. Clever, but ultimately futile against superior individual power." He demonstrated by gathering dark side energy and unleashing force lightning that should have overwhelmed any defense. But Worf's team didn't defend individually. They created a collective force shield, each member contributing their strength to a unified barrier that dispersed the attack harmlessly. "Your philosophy is flawed," Worf stated, his Klingon warrior spirit resonating with force energy. "You believe individual power is supreme, but 8 warriors working as one possess strength no individual can match. This is truth we understand. This is reality you will learn." The battle throughout DS9's corridors became a proving ground for competing philosophies. Dark side-enhanced Jem'Hadar possessed devastating individual capabilities. Telekinesis strong enough to crumple bulkheads. Precognition precise enough to dodge point-blank phaser fire. Physical enhancement that let them fight multiple opponents simultaneously. But Starfleet's force-bonded teams coordinated with precision that individual power couldn't overcome. When a Jem'Hadar attacked one member, the entire team responded with synchronized counter-tactics. When Dominion soldiers attempted to use force abilities, Federation personnel pooled their strength to create defenses that individual force users couldn't penetrate. On the station's promenade, Odo coordinated Bajoran militia through force bonds that transcended his shapeshifter nature. He could feel his fighters' positions, their tactical situations, their ammunition levels through shared awareness that made him a distributed commander rather than centralized leader. When 6 Jem'Hadar attempted to breach the promenade's civilian shelters, Odo's response was perfect coordination. Militia members attacking from 3 directions simultaneously, their timing synchronized through force bonds to create crossfire that even precognition couldn't evade completely. In DS9's infirmary, Bashir discovered that force bonds allowed him to monitor patients' vital signs without instruments. He could feel their life forces, sense when someone was crashing before medical sensors registered the problem, coordinate with nursing staff through shared awareness that made emergency response seamless. When wounded security officers arrived faster than conventional triage could handle, Bashir's force-bonded medical team moved with choreographed efficiency, each nurse knowing exactly what the others were doing, each doctor sharing diagnostic insights instantaneously. The entire infirmary operating like a single organism dedicated to preservation of life. Above DS9, the space battle continued with increasing intensity. The Dominion had numerical superiority and force-enhanced soldiers. But the Federation had something more valuable: coordination that turned disadvantage into strategic opportunity. Defiant to all ships, Sisko transmitted, his voice carrying force resonance that every bonded crew member felt rather than just heard. Pattern Omega-7. Execute on my mark. No further explanation needed. Through force bonds connecting every ship's command crew, they understood the tactical maneuver completely, a coordinated feint that would draw Dominion forces into vulnerable position for focused fire from DS9's weapon platforms. Mark! 20 Federation ships moved simultaneously with precision that looked choreographed. The Dominion responded by committing forces to intercept, exactly as the shared tactical awareness had predicted. DS9's phaser arrays and torpedo launchers fired through coordinates that the fleet provided through force connection, their combined offensive creating devastation that destroyed 17 Dominion ships in 30 seconds. Impossible, Weiyun protested from the flagship bridge. That level of coordination requires communication lag. They shouldn't be able to execute maneuvers that complex that quickly. They're not communicating, Valdris said, his shadowy form rippling with what might have been concern. They're sharing awareness through force bonds. The entire Federation fleet is operating as unified organism. I've seen this technique before. Ancient force traditions that predated the light-dark dichotomy. But achieving it requires trust and selflessness, that dark side. Training specifically destroys. Can we counter it? The female changeling demanded. Yes, Valdris decided, but not through matching their coordination. We counter by overwhelming it. Deploy the full-force combat battalion. 500 Darkside-trained Jem'Hadar attacking simultaneously. Their individual power will exceed anything the Federation's cooperation can withstand. The assault intensified. Dominion boarding craft penetrated DS9's shields through gaps that conventional sensors couldn't predict, but force precognition identified. 500 Jem'Hadar, each trained in darkside techniques, each capable of devastating force manipulation, poured into the station's corridors in coordinated assault that threatened to overwhelm defensive positions through sheer power. Kartek led the assault toward Ops, his path marked by crushed bulkheads and defeated security teams. His force abilities had grown exponentially through combat. He could now sense life forces throughout. Entire sections could telekinetically manipulate objects massing several tons, could project force lightning that burned through reinforced armor. The Federation falls today, Kartek announced, his voice amplified through darkside power to echo across the station. Your cooperation means nothing against true strength. Surrender or die. He reached Ops' entrance, reinforced doors designed to withstand orbital bombardment. With darkside-enhanced strength and telekinetic force combined, Kartek tore them from their mountings and hurled them aside like discarded toys. Inside, he found Captain Sisko and the senior staff waiting, their force bonds glowing with visible energy that made the air itself seem alive with potential. You're right that cooperation alone isn't enough, Sisko acknowledged, his voice carrying calm certainty. But we're not just cooperating. We're unified. We're synchronized. We're a community defending itself through shared strength that individual power cannot match. Prove it. Kartek challenged, gathering dark side energy for an attack that would demonstrate the futility of Federation philosophy. He unleashed force lightning with intensity that had destroyed starship bulkheads. The attack struck the ops crew's collective force barrier and stopped. Not dispersed, not absorbed. Simply stopped, as if the lightning had encountered an invisible wall generated by unified will that exceeded any individual's capability. Impossible, Kartek breathed. That attack should have overwhelmed any single defender, Sisko completed. But we're not single defenders. We're 8 force-bonded individuals creating unified defense stronger than sum of parts. This is what you don't understand about the light side. It's not weaker, it's multiplicative. Dark side power adds. Light side power multiplies through connection. Then I'll bring enough power to overwhelm multiplication itself, Kartek roared, channeling every particle of dark side energy he'd mastered into a single devastating assault. But the ops crew responded not individually, but as perfect synchrony. Their combined force projection didn't just defend. It reflected Kartek's own attack back at him, with force amplified by their coordination. The Jem'Hadar warrior was hurled backward through the demolished doorway, his armor scorched, his consciousness reeling from experiencing his own dark side fury turned against him. You cannot win, Sisko stated with absolute certainty. Individual power will always be limited by the individual wielding it. Shared strength grows exponentially through connection. This is fundamental truth the Dark Convergence refuses to acknowledge. Throughout DS9, the battle reached its critical point. 500 Darkside-enhanced Jem'Hadar fought against 7,000 station personnel, most of whom had minimal force ability, but all of whom were connected through bonds that made them stronger together than any individual could achieve alone. Civilian engineers worked with security teams, their force bonds allowing perfect coordination that turned maintenance corridors into tactical advantages. Medical personnel sensed where wounded personnel were before transporters could lock on, their coordinated response saving lives that conventional triage would have lost. Even civilians without combat training contributed, their life forces adding to the station's collective force presence, their unified will to survive strengthening everyone's defensive capabilities. The Dominion had brought overwhelming individual power. The Federation demonstrated that community was stronger. When Kartek finally regained consciousness and retreated to report to Weyoun, his message was devastating in its implications. Their cooperation isn't weakness disguised as virtue. It's strength we cannot match through individual power alone. Every soldier we send, they counter with coordinated teams that exceed our individual capabilities. We're losing. Valdris, listening to the report, felt something he hadn't experienced in millennia: doubt. The Dark Convergence had conquered dimensions through dark side mastery. They'd taught countless species that individual power was supreme, that domination was strength, that the strong ruled and the weak served. But Deep Space Nine's crew was demonstrating something that threatened the very foundation of dark side philosophy. That cooperation could be stronger than domination. That unity could exceed individual capability. That the Force itself favored connection over isolation. Retreat, Valdris ordered, his shadowy form flickering with uncertainty. We withdraw to reassess. Retreat? The female changeling's outrage was absolute. We have numerical superiority. We have force-enhanced warriors. How can we retreat? Because we're losing, Valdris admitted, the words bitter. The Federation has discovered something we didn't anticipate. That light side philosophy isn't handicap, but force multiplier. Their coordination exceeds our individual power. If we continue, we'll waste resources proving what's already evident, that this approach requires recalibration. The Dominion fleet withdrew, leaving behind thousands of dead and the wreckage of ships destroyed by coordination that shouldn't have been possible. As the last Dominion vessel disappeared into the wormhole, exhausted cheers erupted throughout DS9. But Sisko didn't celebrate. He stood in the damaged operations center, feeling through force bonds the station's collective exhaustion. The wounded personnel in the infirmary, the dead who'd sacrificed everything to prove that cooperation could defeat domination. "We won," Kira said quietly, her force presence flickering with fatigue. "Against impossible odds, we actually won." "We survived first contact," Sisko corrected grimly. "The Dominion will return with tactics adapted to counter our coordination. The Dark Convergence will develop new training to overcome what we demonstrated. This wasn't victory. It was proof of concept, ours and theirs." "Then what do we do?" Dax asked. Sisko looked around at his crew, exhausted, wounded, but united through bonds that transcended anything Starfleet had imagined possible when the Force first manifested 72 hours ago. "We build on what we've learned," Sisko decided. "We teach other Federation facilities to develop force bonds. We create training protocols for cooperative force use. We demonstrate to the entire Alpha Quadrant that the light side strength comes not from individual power, but from unified purpose." "And when the Dominion returns?" Worf asked. "We'll be ready," Sisko promised. "Because they learned the dark side makes individuals powerful. We learned the light side makes communities unstoppable. And that lesson, that understanding, that will determine who wins this war." Above DS9, the Bajoran wormhole pulsed with energy as the prophets observed events with satisfaction that transcended linear understanding. The Force had awakened in the Star Trek universe, and the first battle had demonstrated fundamental truth. Power without connection was strength waiting to be overcome. But unity, enhanced by Force capability, that was strength capable of changing the galaxy forever. The war transformed overnight. The Battle of Deep Space Nine echoed across the Alpha Quadrant with implications that transcended military victory. It proved that the Force, this new fundamental energy permeating reality, could be wielded in ways that challenged every assumption about power and capability. Starfleet Command received Sisko's complete combat logs within hours of the Dominion retreat. Within days, every Federation starship, every starbase, every colony received emergency protocols for developing force bonds and collective capabilities. The Federation was adapting with the institutional flexibility that had always been its greatest strength. But the Dominion was adapting too. 3 weeks after DS9's defense, Captain Sisko stood in a secured conference room with Admiral Ross, representatives from the Klingon High Council, Romulan Tal Shiar, and even a Cardassian liaison whose presence demonstrated how desperate the Alpha Quadrant situation had become. "Intelligence, reports are clear," Admiral Ross stated grimly, displaying holographic data from deep cover operatives. "The Dominion isn't just training more force-using soldiers. They're developing entirely new tactical doctrines specifically designed to counter our collective force coordination." "Explain," demanded Chancellor Martok, the Klingon leader whose warrior philosophy made him both fascinated and disturbed by force capabilities. "They're creating force nullification technology," Ross explained, highlighting technical schematics. Devices that disrupt the quantum entanglement patterns underlying force bonds. If they succeed, our teams won't be able to coordinate through force connection. We'll be reduced to individual combatants facing dark side-enhanced Jem'Hadar. And they're recruiting beyond the Jem'Hadar, added Commander Sela of the Romulan Star Empire, her expression calculating. Reports indicate the Dominion is offering force training to any species willing to serve them. Breen, Cardassians, even disaffected Federation citizens who believe dark side power offers advantages their societies deny them. How many? Sisko asked, though he suspected the answer would be devastating. Preliminary estimates suggest 50,000 individuals across multiple species undergoing dark side training, Sela confirmed. Not all will achieve significant capability. Force sensitivity appears to vary by individual. But even 10% success rate means 5,000 force-using soldiers dedicated to Dominion service within months. We need to counter-recruit, suggested Gulevek, the Cardassian representative. Offer force training to populations the Dominion targets. Demonstrate that light-side philosophy provides comparable power without requiring surrender to tyranny. We're already doing that, Sisko replied, but there's a fundamental problem. Light-side training based on cooperation and trust takes longer to develop than dark-side training based on channeling existing aggression. A Jem'Hadar soldier can learn to weaponize rage in weeks. Teaching someone to create force bonds with teammates requires months of building genuine trust. Then we need a force multiplier, Martok growled, some advantage that exceeds the Dominion's numerical and training speed advantages. Sisko, your station demonstrated that force-bonded teams could defeat more powerful individual opponents. Can this principle be scaled? Could we create force bonds connecting entire fleets? Entire planets? Sisko exchanged glances with Dax and Bashir, who'd accompanied him to the conference. The question had been haunting them since the battle. Theoretically, yes, Bashir answered carefully. The Force appears to have no distance limitation. It connects all living things across the universe simultaneously. If we could establish force bonds at planetary or even stellar scale, the coordination advantages would be extraordinary. But practically, Dax cautioned, we don't know if organic minds can handle that much shared awareness. The ops crew maintains bonds with maybe a dozen individuals maximum. Attempting to bond thousands or millions might cause psychological damage we can't predict. Or, came an unexpected voice from the chamber's entrance. You could ask beings who already exist at that scale for guidance. Everyone turned to see a figure that made even the most jaded conference attendees stare in shock. It appeared humanoid, but composed of pure, luminous energy, its form suggesting features without being bound by physical limitation. Power radiated from it with intensity that made force-sensitive individuals in the room gasp. I am Seraphis. The being introduced itself, its voice resonating at frequencies that transcended normal sound. Emissary of the light convergence, counterpart to the dark convergence that teaches your enemies. The prophets of Bajor requested our intervention after observing your struggle. The prophet sent you? Sisko asked, his emissary connection allowing him to sense truth in the entity's words. The prophets exist at the boundary between your universe and the Force dimensions, Seraphis confirmed. They cannot directly intervene in linear events without violating principles they've sworn to uphold. but they can facilitate contact between your reality and beings who can help. We are that help. And what exactly is the light convergence? Admiral Ross asked with appropriate caution when facing dimensional entities offering assistance. We are what Valdris and the Dark Convergence claim to be, but are not. Beings who have achieved transcendence through force mastery, Seraphis explained. But where they achieved power through domination and isolation, we achieved understanding through connection and cooperation. We exist as collective consciousness, spanning multiple dimensions, united through force bonds that connect trillions of individual beings into harmonious whole. Trillions? Bashir's enhanced mind struggled with the scale. How is that psychologically sustainable? Because we don't impose unity. We facilitate it, Seraphis replied. Each being retains individual identity while participating in collective awareness. Imagine your Federation ideals made manifest through force connection. Diversity united through shared purpose rather than enforced conformity. That sounds too good to be true, Sella observed with Romulan cynicism. What do you want in exchange for this help? Nothing except your success, Seraphis said simply. The Dark Convergence seeks to spread their philosophy across all dimensions. Domination, hierarchy, power through subjugation. Every reality they conquer becomes a recruiting ground for spreading darkness further. Your universe represents an opportunity for demonstrating that light-side philosophy can achieve comparable power without requiring surrender to tyranny. If you succeed here, it weakens the Dark Convergence across all dimensions. If you fail, they grow stronger and extend their reach. Then teach us, Sisko decided with command authority. Show us how to create force bonds at the scale necessary to counter Dominion advantages. We'll prove that cooperation defeats domination. We will teach willingly, Seraphis agreed. But understand, what we offer requires commitment that transcends military alliance. Creating force bonds at planetary scale means accepting permanent connection to billions of beings. You'll feel their joys and sorrows, their fears and hopes. You'll be part of something larger than yourself in ways that cannot be reversed. The Borg offers similar promises, Sella pointed out. Enforced unity through technological assimilation. How is your offer different? The Borg erase individuality to achieve collective efficiency, Seraphis replied. We enhance individuality through collective connection. Borg drones lose themselves in the hive mind. Light Convergence members discover themselves more fully through understanding how they relate to others. It's the difference between slavery and community. Sounds like Federation propaganda, Martok said bluntly. But if it works tactically, philosophy is secondary. Can your teaching help us win this war? Yes, Seraphis confirmed. But victory will require more than military capability. The dark side spreads through fear, anger, and desperation, emotions that war generates abundantly. To truly defeat it, you must demonstrate that even under existential threat, light side principles can sustain civilization. You must prove that cooperation remains viable when domination seems easier. The challenge was accepted. Over the following months, the Light Convergence's teachings spread across Federation space with transformative results. Seraphis and other light-side entities worked with Starfleet personnel, Bajoran spiritual leaders, Vulcan philosophers, and representatives from dozens of species to develop training, protocols that adapted ancient Force traditions to the Federation's unique cultural context. On Earth, the Starfleet Academy curriculum was revolutionized. Cadets who demonstrated force sensitivity, roughly 1 in 30, underwent training that combined traditional Starfleet discipline with meditation techniques designed to develop collective awareness. Mock battles became exercises in force-bonded teamwork, with cadets learning to coordinate starship operations through shared consciousness rather than just verbal communication. On Vulcan, the Kolinar Masters discovered that their logic-based meditation practices aligned perfectly with light-side training. Vulcans who'd achieved emotional mastery found that force bonds enhanced their natural telepathic abilities, allowing them to create networks of shared consciousness that operated with mathematical precision. On Kronos, Klingon warriors initially resisted force training as dishonorable mysticism. But when Martok himself underwent light convergence instruction and demonstrated that force bonds enhanced warrior effectiveness without diminishing individual combat prowess, Klingon attitudes shifted. The Quaham traditions, ancient warrior mystics dismissed as legend, were rediscovered and integrated with modern training. Even the Romulans, secretive and paranoid by culture, developed their own force traditions. The Tal Shiar created Shadow Wardens, operatives who used force bonds for intelligence coordination while maintaining the deception and strategy their society valued. But the most dramatic transformation occurred on Deep Space Nine. Sisko's crew became the Light Convergence's primary students, their success during the initial battle marking them as proof of concept for scaled force bonding. Under Seraphis's guidance, they expanded their bonds beyond the senior staff to include thousands of station personnel, military and civilian, Starfleet and Bajoran, even visiting traders who remained long, enough to integrate into the community. The result was unprecedented, a space station operating as unified consciousness while respecting individual autonomy. Engineers knew immediately when systems needed maintenance because they felt the station's operational stress through force connection. Medical personnel sensed health crises before symptoms manifested physically. Security teams coordinated responses with precognitive awareness that made them nearly impossible to surprise. This is what the Federation could become, Kira observed during a meditation session with Sisko and other senior staff. Through their deepened force bonds, she could feel the station's collective consciousness like a living organism. 7,000 individual minds contributing to shared awareness that exceeded any single perspective. Not a hive mind like the Borg, but a community consciousness that enhances rather than erases individuality. It's also exhausting, O'Brien admitted, his engineering, pragmatism unchanged despite force development. Feeling everyone's emotions, their concerns, their joys, it's beautiful, but overwhelming. I need regular breaks from the collective just to remember who Miles O'Brien is as an individual. That's healthy, Seraphis assured them, the light entity's presence now familiar, rather than alien after months of teaching. Balance between connection and autonomy is essential. The dark side's error is believing strength requires isolation. The light side's wisdom is understanding that strength comes from choosing connection while maintaining individual identity. You must be whole beings who choose to participate in the collective, not fragments absorbed by it. The Dominion won't care about philosophical balance, Worf stated practically. Their next assault will come with tactics specifically designed to counter our coordination. We need military applications, not just spiritual growth. You have both, Seraphis replied. Deep Space Nine is, now, a force nexus, a location where collective consciousness has achieved sufficient density to affect reality directly. When the Dominion attacks again, you won't just coordinate through force bonds. You'll be able to manifest collective will as tangible force power exceeding anything individual force users can achieve. Demonstrate, Sisko requested, his emissary intuition sensing that Seraphis was offering something beyond theoretical teaching. Seraphis's luminous form brightened. Very well, all of you. Focus on a single shared intention. Something simple. The conference room's temperature. Collectively will it to decrease by 5 degrees. The senior staff concentrated, their force bonds synchronizing intention across multiple minds. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the temperature dropped, not through environmental controls, but through direct manipulation of molecular motion via collective force will. We just affected physical reality through shared intention, Bashir breathed, his enhanced mind racing through implications. That's not coordination anymore. That's literal manifestation of collective consciousness as tangible force. Exactly, Seraphis confirmed. When enough force-bonded beings focus unified intention, they can achieve effects that individual force users require years of training to accomplish. A single dark side master might crush a starship through personal telekinetic power. But 1,000 light side practitioners, properly bonded, can protect an entire planet through collective defensive will. That's the force multiplier we need, Admiral Ross said via subspace from Starfleet Command, monitoring the demonstration remotely. Captain Sisko, I'm authorizing Deep Space Nine as the primary testing ground for large-scale force bond applications. We need to determine the upper limits of what collective force consciousness can achieve before the Dominion forces our hand. The testing began immediately, pushing boundaries of what organic minds could sustain. DS9's force-bonded community learned to create defensive force barriers that could withstand sustained weapons fire, coordinate starship fleet movements with such precision that hundreds of vessels moved as single organism, sense Dominion, fleet movements across light years through force disturbances, their dark emotions created, heal injuries through collective life force channeling that exceeded medical technology, even achieve limited precognition, showing probable futures based on current decisions. But with power came cost. Maintaining force bonds at planetary scale required constant mental effort. Personnel reported vivid dreams where they experienced others' memories. Some struggled with distinguishing their own emotions from the collective's background awareness. A few required temporary separation from the bonds to restore their sense of individual identity. We're approaching a threshold, Dr. Bashir warned, during a senior staff meeting 6 months after the Light Convergence's arrival. Psychological assessments show that extended force bonding is changing neural architecture. Not damage exactly, but permanent alteration of how consciousness operates. People who've been bonded for months can't fully separate from the collective anymore. They've become fundamentally communal beings. Is that necessarily bad? Dax asked, her Trill perspective offering unique insight. The symbiont-host relationship permanently changes both beings too. We don't call that damage. We call it symbiosis. Maybe force bonding creates a new kind of consciousness that's different from individual awareness, but not inferior to it. The difference, Odo pointed out, is that Trill choose symbiosis knowing the consequences. Are we ensuring everyone joining force bonds understands they might never be fully individual again? That's a fair concern, Sisko acknowledged. We need informed consent protocols. People must understand that force bonding at this scale creates permanent changes to consciousness. They deserve to choose with full knowledge. But events outpaced policy development. Long-range sensors detected massive Dominion fleet buildup in the Gamma Quadrant. Over 1,000 ships assembling for an assault that would dwarf their previous attack. Intelligence suggested they were preparing to deploy 15,000 Force-enhanced soldiers backed by the Dark Convergence's most powerful entities. The final battle was coming. The assault on Deep Space Nine began with a dimensional rift tearing open beside the Bajoran wormhole. Not Dominion ships emerging from the stable passage, but a tear in reality itself, allowing direct transit from the Force dimensions. Through the rift came Valdris, but transformed. The shadowy entity had grown exponentially more powerful, his form now spanning kilometers, his presence in the Force like a black hole of dark intent that made even hardened warriors feel instinctive terror. Captain Sisko, Valdris's voice resonated across dimensional barriers to speak directly into minds. 6 months you've had to prepare. 6 months the light convergence has trained your people in their weakness, disguised as philosophy. It ends now. Witness what true dark side mastery accomplishes. The dimensional rift expanded, and through it poured not ships, but pure dark energy. Force power weaponized at scales that defied comprehension. It struck DS9's shields and began corroding them, not through kinetic impact, but through metaphysical assault on the very concept of protection. "Shields failing," O'Brien reported, his voice tight with stress. "Whatever that energy is, it's not affected by conventional defenses." "Because it's not conventional attack," Seraphis responded, the light entity manifesting in ops with urgency. "Valdris has gathered dark side power from across multiple dimensions. He's not attacking your station. He's attacking the idea of your station existing. Reality manipulation at fundamental level." "How do we counter that?" Kira demanded, watching shield integrity collapse despite maximum power allocation. "With reality reinforcement through collective will," Seraphis replied. "Every being on this station who's force-bonded must unite their intention toward a single purpose. Deep Space Nine continues to exist, not defending against attack, asserting existence itself." "That's insane," Bashir protested. "You're asking 7,000 people to collectively believe the station exists strongly enough to override dimensional assault." "Yes," Seraphis confirmed. "Because in Force dimensions, consciousness determines reality. If enough minds, unified through light-side bonds, assert existence with sufficient conviction, reality will conform to that assertion. It's the ultimate expression of collective force power. Not attacking or defending, but simply being so completely unified in purpose that the universe has no choice but to acknowledge your will." Sisko felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders like never before. "All hands," he transmitted across every comm channel and simultaneously through force bonds connecting the entire station. "This is Captain Sisko. We're facing an attack that targets our existence itself. I need every person on this station, military, civilian, visitors, everyone, to unite through force bonds and focus on a single thought. Deep Space Nine exists. We are here. We continue. Focus everything you have on that truth." The response was immediate and overwhelming. 7,000 minds synchronized through force bonds developed over months of practice. Their collective consciousness focused not on tactics or weapons, but on the simplest, most fundamental truth: we exist. The effect was visible even to non-force sensitive observers. Deep Space Nine began to glow, not with light exactly, but with presence, as if the station was becoming more real, more solid, more undeniably existent with every passing second. Valdris's dimensional assault struck that unified assertion and stopped. Impossible! The dark entity's shock resonated across dimensions. No collective should have sufficient cohesion to override my assault. You're 7,000 individuals. You cannot achieve the unity necessary to... We're not individuals anymore. Sisko interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of 7,000 souls speaking in harmony. We're a community, a family, a civilization united through force bonds that make us stronger together than any individual could achieve alone. Your dark side philosophy can't comprehend this because it requires isolation to function. But we've transcended isolation. We are Deep Space Nine, and we exist. The station's collective assertion intensified until reality itself seemed to bend around their unified will. The dimensional rift Valdris had created began closing, not because anyone attacked it, but because 7,000 minds refused to acknowledge its validity. This isn't over, Valdris warned, his form already retreating toward the collapsing rift. The dark convergence has infinite resources. We'll return with greater power. And we'll be ready, Sisko promised. Because every time you attack, you teach us more about collective force capability. Every assault makes our bonds stronger. You're fighting an enemy that grows more powerful through the very act of defending together. That's a war you cannot win. The rift sealed, and the immediate threat passed. But through the Bajoran wormhole poured the conventional Dominion fleet, 1,000 ships prepared for the largest assault the Alpha Quadrant had witnessed. Here we go, Kira said, her force presence blazing with warrior determination. The real battle. But the real battle proved something neither side expected. DS9's force-bonded community had spent months training collective capabilities. The Dominion brought 15,000 dark-side-enhanced soldiers and 1,000 ships. The resulting clash demonstrated conclusively which philosophy the Force itself favored. Dominion boarding parties that breached the station's hull encountered not scattered resistance, but unified consciousness manifesting as tangible force power. When Jem'Hadar attempted dark-side attacks, they faced collective defensive will from hundreds of force-bonded defenders simultaneously. Individual dark-side power, no matter how impressive, couldn't overcome that level of coordinated response. In space, the Federation fleet, now numbering 300 ships, whose crews had developed force bonds over 6 months of training, moved with liquid precision that made them effectively a single distributed organism. When Dominion vessels attempted to flank or divide the fleet, they discovered that force-bonded coordination eliminated the communication lag that usually made such maneuvers effective. The Defiant, crewed by Sisko's original force-bonded team, became a legend in a single battle. Piloted through direct force connection that made the ship an extension of its crew's collective will, it moved through Dominion formations with impossible grace, dodging fire that sensors said should have hit, striking with precision that targeting computers couldn't match, coordinating with other vessels through shared tactical awareness. But the turning point came when DS9's entire force-bonded community, all 7,000 beings, focused their collective consciousness on a single objective: end the battle. without mass casualties. What followed transcended normal warfare. The station's unified will manifested as visible force energy that washed across the battlefield like a wave of pure intention. It didn't destroy Dominion ships or kill Jem'Hadar soldiers. Instead, it simply stopped the fighting. Weapon systems across Dominion vessels failed not from technological attack, but from collective assertion that violence would cease. Jem'Hadar soldiers, attempting to channel darkside, rage found their fury dampened by overwhelming presence of light-side unity. Even Vorta commanders discovered their orders to continue assault being ignored, as force-influenced reality itself suggested cooperation over conflict. "What's happening?" Weyoun demanded from the Dominion flagship, watching his fleet become inexplicably pacified. "Why aren't our weapons firing?" "Because 7,000 beings unified through light-side bonds are asserting their will on reality," came Seraphis's voice, the light entity manifesting on the Dominion bridge uninvited. "They're not attacking you. They're suggesting that violence is unnecessary, and their collective conviction is so strong that the Force itself is conforming to their assertion. This is the ultimate expression of light-side philosophy. Not defeating enemies, but transforming conflict into cooperation through unified will." "That's impossible," Weyoun protested. "The Dominion serves the Founders. We cannot simply stop fighting, because some collective wishes it." "Can't you?" Seraphis challenged. "Look at your soldiers. Feel their emotional state through whatever connection darkside training provides. They're exhausted, traumatized, questioning why they fight. The collective consciousness of Deep Space Nine is offering them an alternative. Peace, community, connection instead of endless warfare. Many are choosing to accept that offer." It was true. Across Dominion ships, Jem'Hadar soldiers, genetically conditioned for aggression, but now exposed to light-side presence that promised something beyond violence, began laying down weapons. Not through coercion, but through choice enhanced by force-influenced understanding that cooperation offered futures domination never could. The battle ended not through victory or defeat, but through transformation. Dominion forces that had come to conquer instead found themselves offered membership in something larger than empire or ideology. A force-bonded community that valued their existence while refusing to submit to their domination. Thousands chose peace over conflict. Others retreated, confused and shaken by encountering enemy that defeated them by refusing to be enemy. In the aftermath, Captain Sisko stood on DS9's promenade, looking at the previously hostile Jem'Hadar soldiers who'd chosen to remain. They weren't prisoners. They were guests, beings offered opportunity to experience light-side philosophy directly rather than through dark-side indoctrination. "You've changed the war," Admiral Ross said, standing beside Sisko, with awe evident in his voice. "Not by defeating the Dominion, but by demonstrating alternative to endless conflict. Half their assault force defected after experiencing what force-bonded community feels like. That's unprecedented." "It's not victory yet," Sisko cautioned. "The Founders still command, the Dark Convergence still teaches, and both will adapt to what happened here. But we've proven something important. That light-side philosophy isn't weakness. It's strength that grows through connection rather than isolation. The Federation Council wants to expand force bonding across all member worlds," Ross continued. "Create planetary-scale collective consciousness similar to what you've achieved here. The implications for governance, for economics, for culture, it's revolutionary." "It's also irreversible," Sisko replied quietly. People who join force bonds at this scale change permanently. They become fundamentally communal beings who can never fully return to isolated consciousness. We're not just changing tactics, we're changing what it means to be sentient beings in this universe. Is that so terrible? Came Esri Dax's voice as she joined them. The young Trill had grown tremendously through force training, her symbiont's 8 lifetimes of memories integrating with collective consciousness in ways that created entirely new forms of wisdom. Maybe individual consciousness was always transitional stage. Maybe the Force has always been guiding evolution toward collective awareness, and we're finally achieving it. Perhaps, Sisko acknowledged, but we need to ensure it's chosen, not imposed. The difference between light and dark isn't just cooperation versus domination. It's consent versus coercion. If we force people into collective consciousness against their will, we become no better than the Borg. Agreed, Seraphis said, materializing beside them. Which is why the light convergence offers choice, never compulsion. Those who wish to remain individual consciousness have that right. Those who choose to join collective awareness do so knowing the cost. This is what distinguishes light from dark: respect for autonomy even when unity offers power. A transmission interrupted their conversation. From the Dominion flagship, still holding position outside DS9's weapons range, the female changeling appeared on display, her liquid features arranged in expression that might have been respect. "Captain Sisko," she said formally, "the Dominion has observed your demonstration with interest. You've shown that light side philosophy can achieve effects we believed required dark side power. We're prepared to discuss alternatives to continued conflict." "Alternatives like surrender?" Kira asked with Bajoran skepticism. "Alternatives like coexistence," the changeling corrected. "The Founders created the Dominion to bring order to chaos through control. But your force-bonded community demonstrates that order can emerge through cooperation rather than domination. If this is genuinely sustainable, if light-side unity can provide security without requiring our conquest, then perhaps continued warfare serves neither our interests nor yours." It wasn't peace. Not yet. But it was possibility. The first genuine opportunity for ending the Dominion War through transformation rather than annihilation. 1 year after the Force manifestation that changed the Alpha Quadrant forever, Captain Benjamin Sisko stood in DS9's temple, contemplating how profoundly reality had shifted. The Dominion War continued, but transformed. Combat was now secondary to philosophical competition. Light-side communities demonstrating that cooperation could provide security, prosperity, and meaning that domination never achieved. Slowly, inevitably, Dominion soldiers exposed to light-side philosophy were choosing defection over conquest. The Federation had become something unprecedented. A civilization united not just through treaties and shared values, but through actual force bonds, connecting billions of beings in collective consciousness that respected individual autonomy while providing unprecedented coordination. Challenges remained. Some species resisted force bonding as violation of individual sovereignty. The Dark Convergence continued teaching that isolation equaled strength. Political debates raged about how much collective consciousness society should embrace before individual identity became meaningless. But the fundamental question had been answered. Light-side philosophy wasn't weakness disguised as virtue. It was strength that multiplied through connection. power that grew through cooperation, and a path forward that offered something the dark side never could: sustainable civilization built on consent rather than coercion. "The prophets say you fulfilled your purpose as emissary," Kira told Sisko, joining him in the temple. "You've shown this universe how the Force can serve life rather than dominate it." "I just demonstrated what Starfleet has always believed," Sisko replied humbly. "That different beings working together are stronger than any individual or empire. The Force just made that principle tangible." Through the temple windows, the Bajoran wormhole pulsed with energy, no longer just passage between quadrants, but recognized bridge between dimensions where light and dark convergence existed in eternal balance. The Force had awakened in the Star Trek universe, and it would never sleep again. But in the hands of beings committed to cooperation over domination, community over isolation, and light over darkness, the Force had found not slaves or masters, but partners in the endless work of building civilization worthy of the power consciousness could achieve. The Force flows through all things, but how it flows, whether toward domination or cooperation, that was always the choice. And the Federation had made its choice. Together, this is the way.